When we last met, we talked a little bit about Mr. Hancock, and the timing was 1776-ish, although we did make a reference to the fact that Hancock was actually in Lexington the day of the first skirmish between the colonial militia and the British regulars. And he got out of there because as much as he wanted to be a military hero, everybody knew that he was much better with speaking his mind. And the constitutional, or not the constitutional, the convention was needing his guidance. So we were going to leave. I was going to take us on a time warp to some other place to talk about patriotism in another context. But I guess I was just being selfish. There is a story, and history is about stories, and people who teach history should never get away from telling stories and loving the stories that they tell, because otherwise we have to sit through those classes. Did you ever do that when you were? I'm looking at Alexa. History class, yeah. I'll be very brief today. The story is about Henry's miracle. So Lexington and Concord have occurred. The Continental Congress has already dispatched George Washington to Boston to take charge of what they called the Continental Army. And while he's there, it very quickly was obvious that Boston was under siege. The British controlled all the waterways leading to and from Boston, Boston's great harbor. Also all the land routes in, and they had encouraged loyalists to leave the city. Now the city of Boston at that point was half the size of DeKalb is today, but it was one of our biggest cities, most heavily populated, down by the wharves. So people who ran the shipbuilding and the wharves and so forth were leaving, many of them, thinking, it's a little early in this revolution, I think I'm going to take the British side. So they left. So what? So Washington thought, we need to establish ourselves as the new army for this emerging country. And the only way to do that is really to take Boston. And how do you take Boston when you're surrounded? Well, Boston has heights. How many of you have heard of Bunker Hill? All right, Bunker Hill and Breeds Hill were two of the major heights overlooking Boston Harbor. And there have been a lot of terrible, tragic lives lost at Bunker Hill and Breeds Hill. And the one that was left that hadn't been touched was Dorchester Heights, and it was the tallest one. And Washington knew from his labors in the French and Indian War on the British side that if he could get some cannon up there, then he could command the harbor, and without probably firing a shot, the British would have to retire from the cordon that they had around Boston. But how to do that? And where would he get the cannon? This was a country this America, that didn't even have a bank yet, let alone a lot of military hardware. But it just so happened that about 50 farmers, mostly, in Vermont, took a British fort, Ticonderoga, some months before. And then they abandoned it because the British abandoned it pretty quickly. And there are a lot of cannon up there. In the background, you'll see there were 58 mortars and cannon. The problem was, that was the good news. The bad news was, it was 300 miles away. And remember, at this point, they didn't have delivery trucks and semi-trailers and things like that. So what had to happen is that they had to walk their way in with sleds and oxen 300 miles to Ticonderoga, load up the cannon and the mortars, and then drag them back. The combined weight of those artillery pieces was about 60 tons. So they loaded them on sleds, and the miracle of miracles, it only took 40 days to go there and come back. But imagine this, how many of you jog or walk, a lot on a regular basis? Okay, so 300 miles is long if it was flat, right? So this is the whole length, almost the whole length of Vermont, through Albany and New York, eastern New York, from the north to the south, and then the whole length of Massachusetts, from west to east to Boston, 300 miles. The Berkshires were in between, and they're some of the highest Appalachian Mountains in New England. And they did this all with sleds. They lost one cannon in a creek that was not fully frozen, and it took them a couple days to jack it out, but they got that too. So they arrived with all of that hardware around this date on February 26th. It's not exact, we don't know. They didn't take, selfies and videos. So, and having done that, it took them another 2 weeks, but they eventually snuck up onto Dorchester Heights, and the next morning, after all of them were sort of in place and pushed out so they could be seen from the harbor, one of the captains on one of the British ships, and by the way, there were 120 of them under sail, just, or not under sail, but with sail, looked up and said that he thought that the transformation was equal to that of the genie belonging to Aladdin's wonderful lamp, which was holy cow, you fill in the word. So it took another 2 weeks, but eventually all of the British forces left. They left with 9,000 troops. In addition, some women and children, and about 1,100 loyalists who now feared that they had chosen the wrong side. So we better get out of Dodge, or Boston as it were. And at this point, the aims of the revolution had not been defined yet. This is before, it's about 3 months before the Declaration of Independence was adopted. And another thing I just want to say, well, two things I want to say. One is that the mastermind of this was a fellow named Henry Knox. That's what the story's about, Henry's miracle. So he had no military training. When he conceived of all this, he was 25 years old. He was a manager of a bookshop in Boston. And when he got back with all this, Washington made him head of artillery. Well, this is okay, but he still never fired a cannon. But he learned, and he was with Washington in every battle that Washington was in to the end of the war. And stayed with him every day until the finish. That's a glorious story. It's one of those bits of soldiering that you read about and you just wonder. I can't imagine if we have the ethos anymore to do something like that, but it was remarkable. But I want to make a point, and this will lead us into the next pause for patriotism. It's really worthy of note that valor in that war was not restricted just to free white farmers and merchants. There were 36 or more free black males who fought at Lexington and later went on to fight at Concord. Interestingly, at this time in our history, black men and white men lived alongside each other in regiments that were more fully integrated than American forces would be again until the Vietnam War. A lot happened in between, so stay tuned. We've got another 9 months. We'll touch on that. Thank you.
Thank you, City Manager.